Welcome to our greatest American art form.
The mixtape.
Now, for all of you kids who don't know,
Traditionally, a mixtape is a homemade compilation of media from multiple sources, recorded into a medium like a CD, a VHS, or cassette tape.
what we are presenting to you here is something we call Mixtape Therapy,
A collection of authentic conversations,
often wacky conversations,
inspired by what inspires us.
except instead of a cassette tape, we are bringing you a podcast
So just as you might share a mixtape, we share these conversations with you.
in the hopes that they spark a similar connection to the good old mixtape.
Now, join us for a little mixtape
for some mixtape therapy.
When your rooster crows at the break of dawn, look out your window and I'll be gone. You're the reason I'm traveling on, but don't think twice, it's alright.
And today we're going to be talking about Don't Think Twice, It's All Right by Bob Dylan. Excellent song. Excellent song. This song has been in my life for a really long time. To me, it is the ultimate breakup song. Now, we talk about breakup songs a lot on this podcast, I feel like, so many songs are about love and heartbreak, etc. But to me, this is the ultimate breakup song. And I just, because my parents are older, I grew up listening to a lot of old music, and Bob Dylan was a staple in my childhood home growing up. And so my dad, especially, huge fan of Bob Dylan. And this song, I feel like it so beautifully captures how do we say? It's the bitterness and the feeling of giving up caring post breakup. I'm like losing the word for what this is, but it's like when you're just kind of defeated, and there's a little edge of passive aggressiveness to it that I kind of love, right? Like, you just broke my heart, but don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't think twice. It's all right. And the one that I feel like, or the line that always sticks with me is, I ain't saying you treated me unkind. You could have done better, but I don't mind. You just kind of wasted my precious time, but don't think twice. It's all right. And it's so funny because it's actually, when you say the lyrics, it's quite humorous in a way. Like, it is so passive aggressive and bitter. And yet at the same time, to me, this song kind of makes me want to cry every time I listen to it. Maybe because it's so nostalgic. I definitely want to hear what Scottie thinks of it and his relationship to this song. It's so interesting. As I'm talking about it, I'm realizing when a song is so special to you, it's hard to actually talk about it. It's hard to put your finger on why you like it so much, other than you just like it so much. To me, this song is just like, it always hits. Every time I listen to it, it always hits some kind of melancholic, nostalgic nerve in my body. And I don't know. It's just one of those songs that feels so special to me. So honestly, I want to pass it to Scottie and see what you think about this and how this song resonates with you, and if you've heard this song before.
So, I have never heard this song before.
No way.
Yeah, and a big part of that reason might be because I'm not really I know this is so blasphemous, but I'm not a big Bob Dylan fan. He doesn't do it for me.
It's okay.
And I think that Bob Dylan came along at a time where the singer-songwriter was huge and what he was doing was huge and the way he moved music was huge. But to me, it's probably, I'm a victim of the present because I'm so used to 2.5-minute songs that are very and Bob Dylan tells these huge stories and the songs are 6 minutes long. And so, this song is that story song, right? It's the same kind of story thing. And I think what's so interesting is I got a lot of how you word it, it's paradoxical intention out of it, right?
Yeah.
Of almost he's so upset he's being humorous, don't worry about it, you wasted my time. And there is a level of passive aggressiveness in there, But I thought it was so interesting that, like, even though I feel a level of paradoxical intention, I feel a level of passive aggressiveness. If you looked at it from a real genuine way, it could just be forgiveness. It could just be like, hey, like, we spent this time together, it didn't work out, but don't worry about it, because I was part of that too, and I forgive you too. Like, like, this is a, like, we both learned, we both grew, we both moved forward. There's no reason to beat it up or to worry about it, or like, it's like the finish of a book. Like, when you read a book and you finish it, you don't, like, you might reminisce about the characters and think about it a little bit, but you don't think about all the characters and what they should have done and how it should have been and stuff like that. And we tend to ruminate on relationships that go bad. And there's a level of, feel like, maybe he's telling her and himself, like, hey, don't ruminate, don't worry about it. Like, just like, these are the parts of a relationship that end. And the ending isn't always a bad thing. An ending actually brings a new beginning. Anytime something ends, something new begins. You know what I mean? And so I think there's a lot of love in there. I struggle with this, kind of with my daughter, that some of the passive aggressiveness I want to have with her is also coming from a place of, like, boundaries and, like, what we need to do, and, like, what are you doing, and, like, not intentional, but more of, like a shaping and molding. And it's so weird that I kind of do that, where I'm kind of like, if she does something, I'll go, well, you shouldn't have done that, or something like that. You know what I mean? And, like, that's not always being, I think, like, a really great parent. Um, but there is a level of this flow of emotions that happen in between a relationship, and it's all of them. It's all the things that happen inside the relationship, and they can be bad or good. And in this particular case, it turns out bad, and so he lets her go. But it turns out bad, but he lets those feelings and emotions goes and doesn't ruminate and hold on them. I don't know, what do you think?
I mean, yes. I think that he is wanting to not ruminate about them. I think this is what I hear in the song. I'm like, it's all kind of like, kind of coming together as we're talking about it. But first of all, I think you could see it in a couple ways. One is that it's at that particular point in a breakup or post breakup where you really are just trying to move on. Like, the intensity of the emotion has passed. Maybe you've already gone through the grief, you've gone through the anger, you've gone through the sadness and the longing, and now you're just sort of left with what remains after that. I don't know. I think I love that it isn't about those really intense, powerful emotions, because we have so many songs that are like that are like fully in the grief or in the sadness or in the longing. But this is sort of like the denouement, or like, this is like the that once you've crested that slope of emotion and you're coming down into this place of, like, well, and it's over. Okay. And I think that's interesting, because we don't hear a lot of songs about that. It's interesting, and, like, this song is sort of about this, um like, slower, less intense phase of the journey. On the other hand, I think he's really trying to not care, to not think about it, say, hey, don't worry about it. And yet, obviously, like, in the lyrics, you could tell there's still so much pain there. And I think that's a really distinct experience as well, that we don't hear about a lot in songs, is the battling with our own brains once something is over, to let it go, and the convincing ourselves that we're okay, we're over it. This actually really reminds me of just when I'm talking to clients in particular who have gone through a breakup specifically, and they say things like, I'm over it, but, or I don't, it's not like I'm in love with them anymore, but, and it's not like I don't believe them, right? It's not like I'm saying, oh, they're not over it, or they are still in love with them, but it just really does. It just reminds me of all the convincing that we try to do to push away the thing that we're feeling. And that's what I hear Bob doing in this song, is really wanting himself to be in a place of peace and wishing her well, but he clearly has, like, tons of bitterness and resentment. And I think I love that this song captures that paradox. It's like, yeah, it's over and it's fine, and I wish you well, but also fuck you. and, but I'm going to say it in this really subtle way.
Could I want to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the resentment you feel is your own personal, like your own personal feelings around breakups?
Ooh.
Because I don't, whereas I wholly understand what you're talking about. What if he's just describing the relationship and the past, and he's saying to her and to himself, like, don't worry about it. Like, this is what these things happen in a relationship. This is normal, and a relationship ends, and it's unfortunate that all these things and all the ideas and plans we had aren't going to happen. But maybe he's not resentful. Maybe he's just like stating facts,
Totally. Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure my own perspective on things is informing how I perceive it. Just like clearly I think yours are too, Scottie. Like you have this really equanimous, like peaceful sort of take on this song of like, yeah, no, it's just like they're wishing each other well, which I think is a real testament to how you go through life and how you go through relationships. Um, to me, the line about wasting my precious time is the one that just really lands. And I think, ooh, I'm going to go off on a weird tangent for whatever reason. I think, particularly as women, we see our time being wasted by relationships that don't work out. Um, and the reason for that is, you know, there are many different reasons for that. But I do think because women are conditioned to see their biological clock is constantly ticking, and pregnancy only being able to happen within a certain time frame, but also not just pregnancy and childbearing, of which men have unlimited time seemingly, and women have a limited amount of time in order to procreate. But also, I think women's value is just seen to go down so drastically as they age in a way that men's is not. And I know Bob Dylan's a man and he's singing this song, but I think to go back to this theme of wasting time, I think that is something that I over, I far and above hear more from women than from men when it comes to a relationship ending. Women really say like, he took the best years of my life, or that was my prime, or that was when I had the most basically sexual market value. And now the relationship's over. And I really do think that is as much as we can like laugh at how like nuts and bolts that is, of being like women have limited time to procreate, so they have more resentment. But I think it's actually a really real thing, especially in the way that we're socialized. What's funny is I felt that way because I think women are so heavily conditioned that way. I remember feeling that way even when a breakup ended and I was like 18. I'd be like, he took the best years of my life, like 16 and 17. Like that's, which weirdly, maybe this is a tangent, but I don't think so. We're going with it. So many songs that describe women are talking about how they are at their, like the younger they are, the better. Dancing Queen, only 17. Like all these like just obsession with women's youth. And so I think women are conditioned from a really young age to see their youth as like their primary asset. And then when men take that and then leave them, it's seen as like wasting their most precious asset. So I don't know where to go. I don't know where to go
Well,
from here, Scottie, but I think that's a real thing.
okay, so we'll roll with this theory.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that just means, well, if there's truth in this theory, right? Well, one, every individual needs to be more responsible for how much time they spend in a relationship when they think they shouldn't be there, if they feel like they're wasting time, right? Do you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
the other thing is, maybe in a weird way, because societally, this is where we're at. It would be nice if we weren't this way. Maybe women need to really, look at the time that they spend and have really good communication around what the future is or what direction are we going in. And when their partner gives them that direction, going like, hey, that's the direction I want to go in, or I know I don't want to go that direction. Maybe we should start talking about like splitting up. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, if you're in a relationship and you get out of it and you feel like you wasted time, that's not that other person's fault. Like, they didn't waste they were there while you were wasting your time, but like they didn't necessarily waste your time. Right. And so it's a lot of responsibility on ourselves that if we feel like we're wasting time, to make those changes in our relationship,
Oh yeah. I mean, for sure. For sure. Easier said than done though. I mean,
Oh,
I think it's so easy to
1,000. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about Bob Dylan talking about wasting time and, my precious time if people didn't do that and had a hard time breaking up. You know what I mean?
it's also it's really hard to know what is or is not wasted time. I mean, look, my perspective, I hate the concept of wasted time. Like it makes me really cringe because I don't know that I believe in it. Let me say more. Um, I think the idea of like, oh man, I wasted so much time or I wasted so many years, I actually find to be an inherently flawed concept. Like, I don't know. It's also just, first of all, when has it ever been helpful for you to say, I wasted X amount of time? Because, like, what does it mean to waste it? What are you wasting it? Like, what does that mean? Because aren't we all just here to live and exist and experience life and experience the lows as well as the highs? And if you were stuck in a relationship that was making you unhappy, was that really wasted, or was that teaching you some really important lesson? Was that helping you to become the person that you are now? um, when people, clients, etc., describe to me feeling like they've wasted time doing something, um, I always say something along the lines of, well, I mean, it got you right here today where you're talking about what you do want. It got you to the point where maybe you were willing to get help, or the point where you were willing to re-examine things. So was it wasted? Also, like, I don't know, I don't believe that there's just such a thing as like empty time. Like something was happening during that time. You were becoming who you are now, even if it didn't feel like it, even if it felt like a plateau. Um, so I don't know about you, Scottie, I have like this visceral reaction to people, including myself, thinking that I have wasted time. I mean, I guess it could be a helpful concept, right? Because it helps you decide like what you don't want to do. For instance, okay, I could see it being helpful if I'm saying I don't want to waste my limited time on earth scrolling on my phone. Like I have limited precious moments on this planet. Do I really want to spend it looking at a phone? Probably not. But when it comes to regret and regretting how you spent time, I just find regret to be such a poisonous thought loop to get into. So maybe here's the question, Scottie. Do you feel like you have ever wasted time? Do you believe that we can actually waste time? Or if we were caught in a bad situation, say for years, is that really a waste?
So when you were talking about it, I was thinking it's really messed up how like age and wisdom and perspective, like age gives you perspective, you know what I mean? And so it's only in the last like, maybe like 8, 10 years that I felt like, oh man, I wasted so much time when I was younger, like going out and
Mm,
getting drunk and not, I could have been making music, I could have been making art, I was getting
mm,
wasted at a bar or, whatever else it is. And it's just really unfortunate that age gives you that perspective of that you wasted it. But to your point, I think that probably always we could be more efficient about our time, but sometimes efficiency is 7 years. Sometimes
mm,
efficiency is all that you have at that moment. You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes just staying alive in that moment and surviving is as efficient as you can get because you're in such a low place. And so I really wish that a lot of the concepts of who I am as a person now I would have figured out sooner, but I also recognize that I don't think it could have happened. I just don't think that that was going to happen, like, you know what I mean?
mm,
And it's the reason why someone can tell you something, like, hey, like when you turn 40, you're going to lose your eyesight. And you're like, no, that's just you. And then you turn 40 and you're like, oh, I can't see shit. You know what I mean? Like there's a reason why there's this perspective of like what we do is when we're younger and what you should do. And then, like what older people tell you should be doing and what's important. Like, like that's been going on forever. And so I think that the moment where you recognize that you feel like you're wasting time is the moment where you should make some sort of change. It doesn't have to be a
right.
big change, but some sort of change puts you in a direction that you don't feel like you're wasting time once you recognize it. But the key is recognizing it. And like, some people spend their whole lives. Some people recognize at a very young age that, partying wastes time. I'd rather play baseball and I'd rather be a
Mm.
professional. They recognize what they don't want to waste time at very early. But like, I feel like that, wasted time is a lot about who we see ourselves as people. Because if you're really leaning into yourself and working on yourself and driving yourself, you're not going to feel like you have as much wasted time. If you're not reaching the goals and the things you want, like in relationships and in life and in work and stuff like that, if you're not shooting for goals, you probably feel like you're puttering. You probably feel like you're wasting time. You're just treading water. And so, I mean, I can definitely speak to the fact that like by doing actions like starting my podcast and really getting into my coaching and stuff like that, that has made me feel like that I will no longer waste these certain times. Like, I don't go out as much anymore, not because I'm old, but because I have different priorities of things I want to be really successful at. I mean,
Mm.
but it's unfortunate it took me to 48 to figure that out. But this was the way. Like I love The Mandalorian. I'm a Star Wars nerd. And The Mandalorian, it's like, this is the way. And like, this was the way. Like, it's unfortunate, but this was the way. But now that I'm here, I'm like, I'm not going to waste any more time,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have so many thoughts coming up as you're talking. One is that there is a country song called Wasted Time that I think we need to do at some point because he's talking about the wasted time being the best memories of his life, right? Like the wasted time of hanging out with his friends and like going swimming and like just hanging out and right not being efficient or being productive, but that being like the best parts of life, which I think is worth talking about. But also, when you talk about being efficient, like efficient for what purpose? That's my question.
Efficient in feel like I'm like bettering myself. I think a lot of the
Mm,
time that I wasted, the time I wasted was time that I didn't spill. I wasn't making myself better. I
mm,
was making myself worse. You know what I mean? And even inside certain relationships that ended, like girlfriend boyfriend type relationships for me that ended, um, I think if I was in a relationship where I was making, I feel like I was growing as a person, it doesn't feel as wasted. But then in relationships where I really wasn't growing, um, and then I say that out loud and I go, my growth inside of my marriage before I got divorced it became pretty stagnant.
mm,
But also my divorce grew me more than any other event I've ever had in my entire life. So was the stagnant that I was feeling at the end of that growth, was that just the end? Like that was where the relationship had to end. That was the ending of the relationship. I had grown as much as I could in that relationship. And, obviously if you spend a lot of time with somebody, you get married and divorced, there's a real feeling to that, man, maybe I wasted a bunch of time. But I also realize without my marriage, I 100% would not be here in the relationship I'm in with my daughter, doing the things I'm doing. Without that relationship, with all the things that were negative inside of it, there's so much more great stuff that came out of that. But that was also my job to recognize that. My job was to go, yeah, there was some bad shit. But like, how did you grow out of this? Did you
mm,
grow? And like, what did you grow into? And what did you learn? And that was my responsibility to find that. And that made that retrospectively made the time feel less wasted to analyze that relationship and go, what have I learned? How have I grown? I am better here. I am doing more of this. Like that stuff made me feel less wasted. So maybe the key to wasted time is to go back and analyze the time that you're talking about and going, well, how can I make sure that never happens again? How can I
mm,
make sure that I am better from this point forward? Because ultimately thinking about time in the past, ruminating about time in the past it's such a waste of time. It's so incredible waste of time that you really shouldn't do it all unless you're trying to dig something out of it or, get something out of it to grow you in the future,
mm. Yeah. Well, and this is where, and maybe because I'm a little younger than Scotty, I have a different perspective on this. But when I think about the times in which I felt like I was wasting time. So I felt like I was really wasting time in my 20s. Um, before I decided that I wanted to become a therapist, and I was like kind of in the film industry, but mostly not. And I mean, I was in it, but like not going anywhere. And then I was working in a coffee shop and felt like, just feeling very, I call it, being very underemployed, not knowing what I was doing, feeling like I was spinning my wheels, feeling like I had so much to give, but had no idea what to do. And now I think back on that time with immense gratitude and nostalgia in a way, because I just felt like, there's so many ways of seeing it. On the one hand, it's like, what a quintessential 20 something experience to be like, I'm frustrated. I'm not living up to my potential. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I have this dead end job. I'm just, nothing makes sense to me. I'm like, that is just a part of life. Like, I think that's such an important phase to go through, especially when I talk to people who didn't go through that phase, like who were really on it in their 20s. My sister is someone who comes to mind. Like, my sister was like, you know, college, then nursing school, then became a nurse, then like got a house, then like, she did everything the way that you're supposed to, or like the way that old people would tell you was like, oh, what a go-getter. And that's what everyone said about my sister. And then it was last year, my sister, it was so funny, because I was always working at a coffee shop and my sister was like being a badass nurse. And last year, she took the whole year off from nursing to work as a barista because she really just wanted that experience of like not being always like a go-getter and like just living her life and hanging out and chatting and being with her friends. And now she's back at it, like she's back in the arena doing the nursing stuff. But that was really important for her because she never had that experience. um, and I know I have this special get out of jail free card, which is I can always say anything shitty that I've ever done or will do is always going to make me a better therapist because it's going to give me more empathy, more perspective, um, more ways of relating to my clients. Like, if they say that they feel like they're wasting time, I'll be like, I totally get that. Or if they say, I made some terrible decisions, I'm like, same, right? If I didn't have those moments of wasting time or spinning my wheels or being in relationships that weren't good for me, I wouldn't have the perspective or the empathy to really be able to relate to other people, hold space for other people in the way that I want to be holding space for them. Um, at least the style of therapy that I do is I want to be as human as possible. I'm not trying to be some expert from on high telling you what to do and saying, I do everything right, so let me tell you what to do. I mean, hopefully no therapist is like that, but maybe so. I don't know. I think that's a flawed perspective we have, is that because someone's a therapist, they're an expert and they do relationships perfectly and they do life perfectly. Whereas from my experience and my perspective, the more I fuck up, the more I can use that to really more deeply understand myself and more deeply understand other people. So maybe that's, again, my little get out of jail free card. But whenever I'm struggling or I'm not happy with the way that I'm showing up, yes, that's disappointing. And of course, I'd rather not. I'd rather do less of that. At the same time, it always has some kind of value to me, because it's part of being a human. And in the work I do, I want to be human. Um, so yeah, when I think all of us probably do that thing where we're like, man, if when I was 21, I had just really, you know, put my mind to work and just didn't go out partying and I really focused and I did this, like, where would I be today? And like, that's an interesting thought experiment. I think that too. I'm like, where would I be if I wasn't fucking around with guys who didn't even like me, right? Like, where would I be? Um, but also, um, I probably wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be living this life. And the life we lived is the life we have. I don't know.
All
I
right,
this
so go ahead. I,
no,
I,
no.
I well, I really have a final question
Okay.
before we get out of here. and it's going to shoot a hole in everything that we're kind of talking about.
Great.
Is there really such a thing as wasted time? Because based on kind of my experience and what you're talking about, you can be in your 20s, you can go out and party, do all this stuff. You become 40, you retrospectively look at your life, you're like, oh, I wasted all that time, right? Or you're like your sister, you work really hard in your 20s, and then you have to take this break to waste time being a barista. You know what I mean? And I say waste time. I know she's not wasting time, but she just took her wasted time and she just moved it to like 40 instead of moving it at 20. So like, is wasting time part of the human experience, that we are supposed to waste some time to bring awareness and recognition around what we need to be doing? Do you waste time because you need to unplug, or you need a break, or you work so hard in your 20s that you need a break in your 40s? Because then I was thinking, like, what about like, a musician that's like a concert level musician at the age of 12, right?
Right.
So now
Right.
their whole life is basically planned out for them unless they decide to do something else. And then you're like 50 and you're like, God damn, I wasted a lot of time playing the piano, or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? And so like,
Yes. Yes.
the balance of your life, I think, is probably of like balancing the waste of time I spent with my ex-wife versus the time I'm now. Like wasted time it's only wasted if it's countered or viewed against non-wasted time. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like you have something to judge it
yes.
against. You go, this is wasted time, this is not wasted time. But if you don't have this, you're like, well, this is just time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
Well,
so,
yeah, that kind of comes back to this question I have of like, when you talk about being efficient with your time, uh, which I first of all, of course, I understand what you mean by that on some level, but the concept of wasted time, it's only wasted if you think that we are here to achieve something. I come from the standpoint that we're here to live, right? And of course, we all get trapped into thinking we're here to like reach this level of success that like who even knows what it is, where it is, why it is. Um, but I think most of us, if we take a step back, we can say, yeah, we're obviously not here to just like reach a goal, because what is the goal? Dying, right? Like we're here to live. We're in an existential dilemma. Of course, we have goals and we have things that we want to achieve, but ultimately, we are here for a time to experience living, because there is no ultimate reward for getting to the top of the mountain. We might think there is, but is there really? Once you get to the top of the mountain, it's like, okay, here I am. Now what? So if you think that you're here to achieve a specific goal, yes, there's such a thing as wasted time, because anything that doesn't serve the goal is wasted. But are we actually here to achieve anything, or are we here to have a good life? And if we're here to have a good life, or a full life, I should say, then I don't know that wasted time is a thing, because we're here to live.
well, I mean, I feel like you could easily go, all these basketball players playing basketball are just wasting time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what are they doing? What are they doing to grow as a person? Like what are they doing to like help the community? How are they serving others? Yeah, but
Mm,
ultimately, I mean, but like we pay them millions of dollars and we watch them, multiple times a week play basketball. And so I really think that, time wasted really comes down to how you view and shape your time. You
yeah.
know what I mean? And if you can, I really feel like if you can really get present, like, like you can really get present, don't get too far in the past, get too far in the future, that you like, I don't ever feel a lot of time wasted because I'm so present that like, it's like every hour I'm maximizing every hour. So when a day ends, I'm like exhausted. You know what I mean? I'm like, I didn't waste,
Mm,
even if I like fucked around for an hour, I'm like, I didn't waste any time today because I was on it every hour. I had things to do. I always feel like, the times now that I feel like I'm wasting time is like Sundays when I'm not supposed to do anything. Like that's my goal on Sundays, is to not do anything. And then I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I need to be doing something. You know what I mean?
mm,
And so, maybe my problem is I need to waste more time or
yes.
find more efficient wasted time. than trying to just efficiently use my time all the time. Maybe that's my problem.
Well, that's actually, as like, I had something else come to mind, which is the closest I've ever felt to wasting time, interestingly. Okay, first of all, I'm a human, so obviously I have the experience of feeling like I've wasted time. I think that's like a human anxiety thought. It's like it's a negative thought loop that we get into, is regret and feeling like we've wasted time and are spinning our wheels. But I would say, like, truly, when I think about the ways that I really wasted time in a way, in that the way I spent my time, first of all, didn't lead me anywhere good, and second of all, was really painful in the midst of it. And I have two examples that come to mind, and they're both when I was a teenager. One was obsessing about my grades, obsessing about my SAT scores, really being so obsessed with a goal, which was to get into an Ivy League college, which I did. And then I hated it there. Right? It was like killing myself, working so hard to reach the top of the mountain, and then realizing the top of the mountain wasn't where I wanted to be. And similarly, time spent in an eating disorder, thinking I had this goal that I wanted to be this certain weight or look this certain way. And so spending so much time achieving that goal. And I achieved the goals. Like, both of those goals I achieved. I got into an Ivy League college, I got down to a certain weight, and only to realize I didn't want those goals. And the process was really painful and really self-destructive. Now, of course, broad picture, I am glad I had those experiences, because again, they taught me really important lessons. They gave me an incredible amount of empathy for people who are also striving to reach some external goal that is really painful and doesn't actually make them happy. I'm glad I had those life experiences, because they're really valuable. But that would be sort of, it's interesting, time spent in service of a goal, I think, can be wasted more so than time spent hanging out on a Sunday, like sunbathing and hanging out with your family, or just relaxing.
It feels kind of six in one hand, half a dozen the other, because if you waste time on a goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a goal you achieve, and then you actually, when you get it, you're like, I wanted this. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
don't have a negative, like, I don't want this. Then you're not going to feel like it's wasted. You're going to feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
very, like, I worked really hard and that's really efficient. But when you spend all that time on a goal and you get to the goal and you don't want it, you're like, oh, I wasted all that time. And so it brings me back to this thought that, like, I'm sure as a therapist, you hear this a lot, and this is just a theme, that when you're spending the time, more than likely it doesn't feel wasted. Otherwise, you would stop doing whatever you're doing. Because once you feel like someone's wasting your time, or you're
Mm-hmm.
wasting time in that moment,
Yeah.
you stop it, right? But like in a
Yes.
relationship, as an example, or like, trying to get into an Ivy League school, while you're doing it, you don't feel like you're wasting any time. You feel like, yeah, this is what I need to be doing. But when the end goal is a breakup, or I don't want to go to an Ivy League school, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I wasted a shit ton of time. But you really didn't, because apparently you needed that time to learn that you did or did not want to do whatever it was.
True. Although I do think there are a lot of people who hate the process of going towards their goal, but push forward anyway because they feel like they have to. Do you know what I
Sure.
mean?
And I think
Like,
that's a whole different conversation. You know what I mean? Like,
that's
that's,
right. It's like, if you're not enjoying, to be cheesy about it, if you're not enjoying the journey, then the destination probably isn't worth it.
yeah. Because I
Because
think
what the
that,
heck?
yeah, I think that, like, athletes that tell you they work really hard and like all those kinds of things, even though they're like, oh, I worked hard and I sweated and I grind and blah, 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 whatever, they want to be doing, they want
They
to
have
do
to
that
love it.
grind. Yeah.
And if they don't, then, they're not going to last very long doing
Yeah.
whatever they're doing. There's a wonderful book called Mastery that really I think, and I've mentioned it probably on this podcast, but like, what separates the people who become masters versus not in any given thing. And it's, they actually love the mundane day-to-day aspects of becoming good at something. They actually like working out. They actually like doing scales on the piano. They like those mundane things, and they actually get satisfaction just out of the journey.
They like the time that they're wasting. You know what I mean? They enjoy the time
Yes.
that they're quote unquote wasting, would be more the way I put it.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it.
I enjoy.
I think we should call this episode.
I was gonna say I
We
enjoy
should call
wasting
this
time with
episode
you,
"You
Hannah.
Wasted My Time."
Yeah,
Yeah, you too, Scottie.
yeah, I enjoy us wasting this time together, and I'm so glad that everyone listening and decided to waste their time with us. So if you
Yeah.
decide to waste your time again with us, which I hope you do, make sure you let us know what you think. Drop some suggestions in the comments, or let us know. Maybe we'll use a song or a medium that you have. And hope you come back. We'll see y'all guys soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.